That's I did. I took one just to go. All right.
appears the jury has reached a verdict in this matter. Before we bring the jury in, the court just wants to give somewhat of an admonishment to the folks that are present. Now, whatever this verdict is, it is important that there's not any acting out in the courtroom. There can't be any response either way, whatever the verdict is. So please, if you feel as though you cannot handle whatever the verdict may be, please remove yourself from the courtroom now so as to not create a situation in which we have to address. Y'all can be seated. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, without stating what the verdict is, as we talked about before, the court is going to poll the jury to ensure that this is a unanimous verdict. Starting with juror number 1, this is your verdict, ma'am.
Yes,
Ma'am?
yes, Your Honor.
Ma'am?
Yes.
Ma'am?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ma'am? Sir? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, polling the jury, having found that this is a unanimous verdict, the court will read the verdict as follows. In indictment 2300241, State of Tennessee versus Darius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justin Smith, the counsel will like to stand. Count 1, second-degree murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Darius Bean, not guilty. Count 1, we, the jury, find the defendant, Demetrius Haley, not guilty. Count 1, we, the jury, not guilty. Count 2, not guilty. Count 2, we, the jury, find the defendant, Justin Smith, not guilty. Count 3, aggravated kidnapping with bodily injury. We, the jury, find the defendant, Darius Bean, not guilty. Count 3, we, the jury, find the defendant, Demetrius Haley, not guilty. Count 3, not guilty. Count 4, aggravated kidnapping with a deadly weapon. We, the jury, find the defendant, Darius Bean, not guilty. Count 4, we, the jury, find the Count 4, we, the jury, find the defendant, Justin Smith, not guilty. Count 5, official misconduct, unauthorized exercise of official authority. We, the jury, find the defendant, Darius Bean, not guilty. The defendant, Demetrius Haley, not guilty. Count 5, we, the jury, find the defendant, Justin Smith, not guilty. Count 6, official misconduct, refraining from performing a duty. We, the jury, find the defendant, Darius Bean, not guilty. We, the jury, Demetri Haley not guilty. We, the jury, find the defendant, Justin Smith, not guilty. Count 7, official oppression. We, the jury, find the defendant, Kadarius Bean, not guilty. Count 7, we, the jury, find the defendant, Demetrius Haley, not guilty. Count have performed your duty. We appreciate the time and attention that you all have given to this case. We will now excuse you all from the court. All right, you can be seated. Mr. Bean, Mr. Haley, and Mr. Smith, the jury of your peers have found you not guilty on all charges with these matters. The court will enter the judgment sheets accordingly, and this will conclude the matter that's before the court. Good luck. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead and adjourn.
All rise. Court County Judge, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
But again, now we know the fate more than 2 years after the beating death of Tyre Nichols.
Happening after 22 witnesses.
Kayla, of course, this is by far not the end of the road for these 3 officers, plus the other 2 who were accused in this, Emmett Martin and Desmond Mills. They're all waiting a sentencing from the federal trial that happened last year.
former officers.
Yeah, now we do know each of them were found guilty of at least one charge at federal level, and we know that happened for that. They were waiting to see what the outcome of this trial would be before that sentencing would happen. And of course, the one that is up in the air still at the state level is Emmett Martin. Now, he is the one, his name came up multiple times in this trial. He testified in the federal trial, took a deal at the federal level, but at this point, it's not clear what his state plea may look like. We know that he's on one, but he has not officially accepted. So still look, he will have a separate trial at this point.
About what has just happened. Again, all three officers are acquitted of all of their charges. We also know that Tyre Nichols' family has been in this courtroom from the very beginning as well. Can you tell us about their thoughts, feelings, emotions as they exited the courtroom today?
Yeah, of course, heading into today, we were told that they were happy with the job that the state did, that the prosecutors did in this case. Now, we just heard from prosecutor Paul Hagerman that they are planning to speak to us momentarily. So, of course, we'll have that in a second for you. But we heard from the family. They said they were happy with how the state presented themselves. We know Rovon Wells herself was one of the witnesses called up by the state, the very first witness that they called up to the stand. But as soon as the verdict was read, we did see his sister got up as she was trying to leave the courtroom, immediately just overcome with emotions. Now, of course, they couldn't show that emotion within the courtroom or while the verdict was being read because there were very strict instructions handed down by Judge Jones. But we know at this point that they are overwhelmed with emotion, just waiting to hear from them at this point.
I have to say, I think a lot of people may be a little taken aback. There was an overriding sentiment that while all the charges wouldn't stick, I think that everyone understood that not all 7 would stick against all 3 defendants. There was an overriding sentiment that someone was going to be found guilty in some phase of this entire proceeding, but that is not the case. Your thoughts? Again, you've sat through the entire federal trial late last year. You've been through every moment of this, and you've covered this case every step of the way. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, at the federal level, we saw of the 3 defendants that Demetrius Haley received the harshest penalty. He was found guilty of excessive force causing bodily injury at the federal level, and he's been in custody ever since then. We're expecting something similar because there was clear video that showed out of the 3, he was the only one that administered a kick to Tyre Nichols' body. Now, of course, we know that that is not the case, and he has still remained in federal custody since then. But again, he, along with his 2 other co-defendants, all found not guilty of all charges. So at this point, it'll be interesting to see if the state will try this once again. Will we have another trial coming up? Of course, we'll hear from them momentarily.
Okay, it also seems like in this case, defense attorney is really focused on the use of force with these 3 officers, and they really compared it to what happened with Emmett Mills. Whatever force was used, it was not considered to be excessive in this case.
Yeah, they stressed that the Scorpion team goes in, or used to at the point when it was a unit that existed. They used to go into the most dangerous neighborhoods and deal with the most dangerous suspects. And in this case, they really painted a picture for the jury that Hickory Hill, where this all happened, that neighborhood is one of those dangerous neighborhoods. Now, of course, the big question is, why was Nichols pulled over in the first place? Why were the blue lights turned on? Now, we heard in the federal case that Emmett Martin was the one who really got this all started. He was the one that he told the team that he saw Nichols driving erratically. He was switching lanes, he was speeding, but he even admitted on the stand at the federal level that that was not true and that he was just angry and he was looking for someone to pull over. So it looks like the defense was effective in using their experts to show that being a police officer is based a lot on impulse, and also the environment that you're in. A lot of the decisions that you have to make are on the spot, and they did a good job of also bringing in witnesses to their point that were owners of the credit cards that they say were stolen and found in Nichols's car after the fact.
That is Fox 13's Kayla Solomon. She's live just outside the courtroom down at 201 Poplar. Kayla, we're going to let you go. I know Paul Hagerman, the assistant DA who tried this case on behalf of the state, is going to be addressing the media shortly. We'll be cutting in or staying here, and we'll be hearing from him shortly.
We also have a second reporter that's down at the courthouse today. That is Fox 13's Jack Bilyeu. You are just stepped out of the courtroom. I know that you've had an opportunity to talk to a few people about their reaction to this case. What have they had to say?
Well, guys, I'll tell you what, just a few minutes, look back there, Derek, you can see quite a few deputies sort of came out of the woodworks here. I know you all have seen some of the folks who were standing over behind Kayla's live shot there. There are also some here at the end of the hallway. Around the time that verdict came out, you know, a lot of the folks left. We saw Tyre Nichols' family towards the front of that crowd. They did not look up. They did not say a word. His mother, Rovon Wells, was very sullen. They were flanked by many of the activists who have been so close with that family all along. A lot of them were visibly shaken, visibly crying. They took them into this room back here. We're told that's where prosecutors are actually meeting with the family. They're going to talk this over and then apparently come out and make some kind of statement. Now, behind us here are the elevators. A lot of the defendants' families came out shortly after Tyre Nichols' family. They turned up this hallway, and as they entered that far elevator down the hallway there was a young woman, a relative of one of those former Memphis police officers, who continuously shouted, "Hallelujah, praise Jesus, hallelujah." That went on for probably a minute and a half or so. These elevators don't move very quickly, so they made it in there. She continued yelling. A lot of emotions here. Still no word from the family of Tyre Nichols or those prosecutors that we are waiting on that input. Daryl and Darcy.
That is Fox 13's Jack Bilyeu reporting live downtown at the courthouse today. Again, Memphis police officers. We're talking about Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justin Smith. All three were found not guilty on all charges. The major charges, the most severe charges of second-degree murder, and even the lesser charges of official misconduct and, of course, official oppression.
Yeah,
all three found not guilty.
As you flip the page there, Justin Smith, again, on all 7 counts, not guilty. Tadarius Bean, not guilty. Demetrius Haley. Across the board, the verdict is acquittal for all 3 on all 7 charges. Again, there were several, a couple of dozen lesser charges that all fell under those major charge categories that are basically just wiped off the books after the primary verdict here of not guilty on all 7 counts. 21 counts in total against 3 defendants. Of course, the jury made up of 8 white women, 4 white men, all there were 2 alternates too, a man and a woman, who were dismissed right before.
Continue to say that this was simple police work. It was nothing that was considered, but they framed these 3 officers, what they were doing, they considered it to be simple police work.
Acting within the scope of their duties and responsibilities, given the circumstances that were in front of them. That's
They follow procedure.
That's the way one.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about that jury makeup. That was one of the first things that we, day one, when they brought in this jury last Monday, you could see that there were 16 total, but only one person was get through to this next process. We were told that one juror got sick and another one just simply went home. So yesterday, when it came time, just before duration, there were 14 jurors, and they randomly chose 2 to be the alternates. So ultimately, it came down to 12 that had to make that final decision. And as you mentioned, it was 8 women and 4 men, all of them from Chattanooga. And it seems like what they were told, defense witnesses as well as the defense attorneys, that's what really rang true for them when it came to deciding on this verdict. And they told the judge from the beginning this was a unanimous verdict. And of course, they also have charges considered.
We have to go back to on literally day one. Both the defense and the prosecution seem very happy with their respective voir dire processes. They were happy with jury selection, because jury selection, a lot of times in these instances with trials of this magnitude and the charges of this kind of gravity, that jury selection can take days, sometimes longer than the trial. But in this case, both seem happy with the makeup.
Yeah, exactly. And it still did take days. It just so happened that it was in Chattanooga. We weren't there for that entire jury selection process. So we were ready to go by the 28th. And for some people, that seems to be a benefit, because they're starting they want, instead of having to go through that unpredictable process of jury selection. And just, they went all up until yesterday when deliberations began, and they deliberated about 12:30 to 5 yesterday, and today they started again at 9:30, and they were done by just before 2 p.m. this afternoon. So total was about 8 hours or so.
Kayla, this has to be a relief clearly for these three officers. They weren't sure really what was going to happen in court today. Again, these state charges, they have walked away. They have been acquitted of all of the state charges, but they still have federal charges to deal with.
Yeah, each of them were found guilty of at least one federal conspiracy people say they committed, and that the jury found them guilty of committing right after the beating happened and then the days following. Now, we don't know when the sentencing for that will be, but we do know that a lot of the timing of this all has hinged on what happened here today and what the verdict for this trial would be. Now, of course, the family had said from the beginning they were hoping to get a conviction. They really wanted that second-degree murder charge, because that's what they felt this was. And of course, it was video that many of us have seen plenty of times, and people have formed their own opinions. But again, they were hoping, what would happen here in the state trial would hinge a lot on what would happen when it came to the federal sentencing.
Okay, and that is Fox 13's Kayla Solomon reporting. This has been a long time coming.
Yes, it has.
This all started in early January of 2023.
It did. As a matter of fact, let's take you back to that night. This is video you've undoubtedly seen so many times. This is after the traffic stop. This is after Tyre Nichols had run from the initial traffic stop, trying to, according to his parents, officers charged, plus two others surrounding him on the ground. This is, as I said, that's video it's been played over and over again in the media. They dozens of times this week in court.
But something that we as viewers did not see, that jurors were able to see, and attorneys were able to see. We've seen the video just kind of playing itself out. Mm-hmm. In court, these jurors were able to see it literally frame by frame. They slowed it down so they were able to see the involvement and impact of each officer involved in this case with Tyre Nichols. They were able to see exactly where each officer was positioned, each officer, how close they got to Nichols' body, mm-hmm. every strike, every kick, every punch, every hit with the baton. They were able to determine who was involved, which officer was involved.
Now, this particular piece of video that we have on a loop right here, this is not the actual attack. The beating is, quite frankly, it's still a little hard for a lot of people to watch. So we've distilled that down. That was the aftermath and the officers standing and I want to say evaluating the situation there. That was Skycop video from that night. And as you said, Darcy, it was John Keith Perry, a defense attorney for Tadarius Bean, who said over and over again, my client, speaking of Tadarius Bean, never struck him in the head, never struck him, never kicked him. I mean, he went through, as you said, frame by frame. And the video that the jury saw also had each officer labeled. It was very different from our view. It was the same view, but, you know, there were a lot of analytical features in the video that were able to let the jury understand what was right in front of them. And that's what they saw. And you have to say that Perry, Stingle, and Zimmerman, the three the three defense attorneys did an outstanding job in planting that seed of doubt in this jury of 12.
And clearly in this case, it worked. Again, all five officers are already awaiting sentencing in the federal trial from last year. And as Fox 13 has told you, this is trial number 2 out of 3.
Now, the family of Tyre Nichols is suing the city for $550 million. Now, in that case, attorneys for the city are working right now to turn over hundreds of thousands of pieces of video and other documents to the Nichols family. All of those documents not related just to Tyre Nichols, but related to that pattern and practice lawsuit that's been filed against the city.
We're going to go back to Fox 13's Kayla Solomon. She's back in the courtroom right now, or outside the courtroom, in fact. Kayla.
Yeah, you said it all there, that there was a seed of doubt that was planted by defense attorneys. I know a few months ago when we saw them in the federal trial, it seemed like some of the witnesses were all over the place. As I was sitting there watching it, it was sometimes hard to follow what they were saying, the points they were making. Some of the questions they were asking the witnesses were confusing, and you can tell that they spent these last few months prepping their witnesses. Some of them that they brought back were in the federal trial, but they also brought forth new witnesses. One interesting tidbit of information is that they called Preston Hemphill, one of the former Scorpion Unit team members who was there at the initial traffic stop. The defense called them as their witness. He did not testify on behalf of the state. They also called in the EMT Robert Long, who was on the scene treating Nichols the night that he was beaten. Now, we know at this point that the DA's office is planning to come out in about less than a minute. We just saw Hagerman come out. He walked out, and he at first said that he wanted to speak to the family before addressing us, which is, customary at this point. But right now we're waiting to see what he has to say. So I'm going to toss it back to you so that we can get into place and bring that to you live once Hagerman is ready to speak with us.
Okay.
Thank you, Kayla.
Thank you so much, Kayla. We're also waiting on our Fox 13 legal expert, Andre Wharton, will be here with us to really kind of go step by step on the charges that the officers were facing and the not guilty verdict for all 3 officers involved in this case. Something that was interesting that the defense attorneys continue to bring up was something called use of force continuum.
Mhm.
It is a guideline for officers when it comes to use of force, depending on the severity of the subject's behavior, but also the level of resistance. They continue to focus on that with these 3 officers talking about the kind of force that was used against Tyre Nichols. It was not the same as Emmett Martin and the other officer, Desmond Mills.
That's right.
It's not the same.
They also brought in use of force experts to outline exactly how these officers were trained in accordance with MPD guidelines. And time again, when the defense, those experts made it clear that this is how these men were trained at the time, and that their response to Tyre Nichols was commensurate to his amount of resistance. Again, we refer back to the video that we have seen ad nauseum for the better part of 2 years. That video to the layman looks very, very different. And it's hard, I would imagine, for so many people to understand right now this verdict of not guilty on 7 counts against each officer receiving full acquittal on all 7 counts against them. And I think you're going to hear some of that. You will hear some of that outrage, I believe, when we speak to the Tyre Nichols family. But also understand that the Nichols family is probably exhausted at this point.
I'm sure they have to be. I actually met Rovon Wells just a few months ago, and she said it was exhausting at that point. She said she was tired. She said she wanted some justice for her son, but she also said she just wanted it to be over and for it to not happen again. But here we are now, over 2 years later. They've gone through the federal trial. We have gone through the state trial. Again, all 3 officers have been acquitted on all counts. We're talking about the 7 major counts, but even all of the lesser counts as well. They have been all acquitted of these charges. Now, mind you, there is still the civil trial that is left, and that is against the city of Memphis.
All right, let's go back to the courthouse. Paul Hagerman, Associate DA, about to address the media.
Sure. I want the trial team to flank me. So we are obviously disappointed by today's verdict. We respect the jury's decision, but we obviously strongly disagree with it. We, in good faith, brought this case, and I am convinced to this day that we had compelling evidence that showed that there was proof for every element of every one of the offenses that we charged. The jury took a different view. That is, of course, their right. That's the part of the decision. I want to start out by commending the trial team, Mr. Hagerman, Ms. Johnson, Ms. Headley, who did an excellent job. I wouldn't have done anything different. I thought they brought a compelling case to bear. I also want to commend the family of Tyre Nichols, who showed extraordinary grace and resilience through an incredible ordeal, an unimaginable ordeal. It's hard for me to understand, as I'm sure it's hard for the public to understand, or many in the public anyway, who watched that video, who heard the testimony, who heard the compelling arguments of trial counsel. It's hard for us to imagine how someone could say that none of the defendants were guilty of any of the charges. I personally think any fair-minded person who watches the video would come to the conclusion that everybody there had some responsibility for Tyre Nichols' death. But as I said, the jury took a different view. What I do know is this: Tyre Nichols is dead and deserves to be alive. And that is a tragedy. It's my hope that the public understands that this is part of the system, and that our office will continue to push for accountability for everybody who violates the law, including, if not especially, those who are sworn to uphold it.
What do you think what just didn't connect? What do you think it was? Was it the training? Was it the character witnesses? What do you think it was?
It's so hard to figure that out. It could be any number of a million things. And I am disinclined to try to say, oh, we should have done this differently, or we should have done that differently, because I think the trial team did an excellent job. Obviously you had a situation where, arguably two of the more culpable defendants were not present. Then that allowed the remaining defendants to point the finger at others. I personally think that when you take a look at all of the evidence, that shouldn't matter. Perhaps the jury took a different view. It's just impossible to say.
I know it's very early, but is this a case that you all are looking to retry?
I think it is too early for us to say that. I don't know what the grounds would be for that. We do have to accept the finality of a jury verdict in most cases.
Any thoughts about the jury being from Chattanooga and an all-white jury?
Obviously people have mentioned that as an issue. I'm not going to speculate about that. I think it's a testimony to the fairness of our criminal justice system that we bent over backwards to get a jury from another jurisdiction to assure that the defendants were given a fair trial. Beyond that, I don't think I should comment.
The defense did worked on pointing at Emmett Martin as the most violent of everyone there. It seems that the man had landed with the jury. You're securing a guilty plea for Emmett Martin. Can you talk a little more about his involvement?
Well, obviously, I think the proof speaks for itself, and Mr. Martin was, extremely involved and culpable, and played a key role in the unjustified death of Tyre Nichols. What's going to happen over at the federal court and what will happen with his case remains to be seen.
What kind of conversation did you have with Tyre Nichols' family when they left today?
We spoke to them briefly. Obviously, they were devastated. I think you could imagine that they would be devastated. I think they were outraged, and I think we can understand why they'd be outraged by this result, given the evidence. They quite understandably decided that they needed to go home and process all this, and we're going to give them that respect and respect their privacy.
What sort of message does this give to specifically the Memphis Police Department, who just got done with this pattern and practice investigation and really doesn't have to grapple with the consequences of that either?
Right. So it's important to note that, there have been guilty verdicts over on the federal side. I'm not going to speculate about what will happen over on the federal side, but it's not like there have been no consequences whatsoever from the tragic killing of Tyre Nichols. I personally think that if we're going to make any sense of this tragedy, if we're going to have any silver lining from this dark cloud of both the event itself and, in my view, today's verdict, it has to be that we need to reaffirm our commitment to police reform. and to doing what we need to do to make sure that tragedies like this don't happen again. And I remain committed to that. I'm sure the city of Memphis remains committed to that, and we're not giving up on that.
Are you surprised that they didn't? Because they could have gone for lesser charges than second-degree murder. What, 9 different charges they could have gotten, and they didn't even have to go to those. Did that surprise you?
Was I surprised that there wasn't a single guilty verdict on any of the counts or any of the lesser included offenses, given the overwhelming evidence that I think that we presented? Yes, I was surprised. Do I have an explanation for it? No.
How much did the state rely on the videos from that night, the Sky Cop video, the body cam videos? How much did you all rely on that as far as this trial goes?
Well, I mean, you saw the evidence. You saw the trial as well as I. I think it speaks for itself. Certainly the videos were a big part of the state's case, as they understandably would be. But I don't think the trial team relied entirely on the videos. I think they brought to bear witness testimony, very effective cross-examination of the defense witnesses, and some compelling opening and closing arguments. And I think when you add it all together, I think the state did a hell of a job. I'm not Monday morning quarterbacking about any of the decisions the trial team made. I think they did an excellent job. They're a credit to our office. You know, anybody who does any kind of jury trial work knows that you just can't predict what a jury will do. Them's the breaks, and it's a bitter pill to swallow, particularly in a case like this. But like I said, we can strongly disagree with the jury's verdict, but we nonetheless respect the jury.
Do you have any messages for people in the community who have had direct confrontations with not only the Scorpion team, but other police officers? There are federal lawsuits that are currently underway, people who have accused the Memphis Police Department of brutality. Do you have any message to them?
I guess my message to the community would be twofold. A, even if you were out there outraged by this verdict, please respond in a lawful, peaceful manner. Second, as I said earlier, with respect to any charge of violation of the law, including by those who are sworn to uphold it, we'll enforce the law. And just as we did aggressively in this case, we'll do that in any other case in which the facts and the law suggest that anybody in the law enforcement community or anybody else has violated the law and used excessive force.
Does Mr. Hagerman or Headley or Johnson have any comment
Yeah,
about
please.
y'all tried the case?
We tried real hard. We fought real hard in there. We knew this was always going to be difficult. As DA Mulroy said, we're trying the 3 least culpable in terms of, obviously, Mr. Martin was the primary actor, and he's entered a guilty plea. Mr. Mills with the baton strikes, again, a primary actor, and he's entered a guilty plea. So we knew this trial would be hard. I think y'all saw us fight in there. We did the best we could, and the family, they've been great through this. Today's heartbreaking to them, but they've been with us fighting.
What is it like for you all to go through all of this and looking at the video and talking with the family and definitely expecting something else?
It's disappointing. It's heartbreaking. You try cases. It's a business of trying cases, though. Okay. There's always risk and there's reward, but we keep on going. We try to get justice. And I think we tried hard in there this week to get justice. I know the family was behind us, and, we didn't get the result we wanted or they wanted, but they've thought about Tyre obviously a lot this week, and they're thinking about Tyre now. And
Melanie, Tanisha.
Was there any bit of evidence that was presented over the last week and a half, or any argument made by the defense that felt particularly salient to you guys that you kind of were like, this kind of sucks to deal with and try and move around?
I don't think we can at this point sort of, like I said, Monday morning quarterback or think retroactively about this or that. This blow was particularly powerful. That one was particularly powerful. I think structurally, as Mr. Hagerman has already mentioned, the 2 defendants who were most culpable weren't present in the courtroom, right? That doesn't mean that the remaining 3 defendants weren't culpable. People being responsible for the acts of another, the duty to intervene, the duty to take affirmative steps at what was clearly, a person being beaten to death. That was a structural part of the the trial that was a challenge for the trial team. Other than that, I think it's hard to identify any one thing. It's hard to get inside the mind of the jury.
This verdict, is this going to affect Emmett Martin's plea deal at all, or any sentence he may receive when he does plead guilty?
That's up to the federal court. You know, we really can't speculate on
What
that.
about on the state level?
Well, I think we're not really prepared to talk about that just yet, because what we're doing is we're waiting to see what happens over with the federal sentencing. And once we see what happens with the federal sentencing, we'll have a better idea of what we want to do with that case.
And my last question about the jury, because obviously the jury made the decision, but those who don't understand the process, I know you all want an unbiased jury, but why Chattanooga? Where did that come from as far as that jurisdiction?
Go
Yeah, there was a motion filed with defense to change venue, and there was a study done of the amount of publicity in the various large cities in Tennessee, and it was found that Chattanooga had the lowest amount of pretrial publicity with regard to this case, and so that's why it was chosen.
All right. Thank you all very much.
That is Fox 13's that is District Attorney Steve Mulray right there. You were hearing also Assistant DA Paul Hagerman speaking in reference to how they perceive the outcome of this trial, of the verdict. Again, all three former officers, Darius being Demetrius Haley, and of course Justin Smith, they were all acquitted on all of the charges.
On all 7 counts.
All of them, even the lesser charges.
Total of 21 filed against 3 men in this case. But I think it's an important perspective to keep in mind. You heard Paul Hagerman say it. You heard Steve Mulroy say it a few times throughout their brief remarks there. Keep in mind, these were 3 of the 5 officers charged, and it was Paul Hagerman who called them the 3 least culpable of the 5. Keep in mind, Emmett Martin and Desmond Mills have already taken plea deals with the state. They've already been found guilty at the federal level, as have other officers in this particular case. So I think it is very important to keep it in perspective that there will be punishment for the death of Tyre Nichols. No one is walking scot-free in this particular instance. And I think the most poignant thing that Steve Mulroy said were very close to the top of his remarks when he said it's hard to understand how someone could say that they were not guilty of those charges after looking at that video. It's very hard for him to understand. And I think that's probably a sentiment that's shared throughout the Memphis community tonight, and to all of those who watched this case.
I think also because when we saw the video, the immediate conclusion was that every person that was there, you held some sort of responsibility for the fact that this young man lost his life. But again, in this case, these 3 officers, this jury out of Hamilton County, their actions, their behavior that night, this jury felt that it was exactly police posse. It was nothing out of the ordinary. It was not to be considered excessive. It was under protocol. Even though for the rest of us that saw the video, again, we may have seen things a little bit differently. But as I said earlier, the video was slowed down second by second for these jurors. So they saw every strike, every move, every hit, every punch, every kick. They saw it all in that format. We didn't see it that way. But to the naked eye, it felt like this verdict was going to be a little bit different, but it wasn't today.
And of the 7 counts, I think that I'm most surprised that charges 6 and 7 didn't stick on someone.
Something.
Because charge 6, official misconduct, refraining from performing duty, that means basically I did nothing to help. You know, you have a duty as an officer to help someone in need, and also official oppression. It's hard to watch the video and watch them even in the aftermath of the beating. The video we've seen time and time again just over the past few minutes of those officers circling a Tyre Nichols who's laying on the ground helpless. It's hard to see that video and not see that as oppressive, but in the eyes of the law, in this particular case, according to the jury, not guilty on all 7 counts. And we should say we did get a statement from the attorneys Ben Crump and Antonio Ramanucci. They reacted to the verdict. There it is right there, but we're going to read part of it. It says, today's verdicts are a devastating miscarriage of justice. The world watches Tyre Nichols was beaten to death by those sworn to protect and serve. That brutal, inhumane assault was captured on video, yet the officers responsible were acquitted.
We know we are not alone. We thank the Memphis community, people across the nation who have stood by Tyre's family, lifted their voices and demanded accountability.
And we're going to have this entire statement posted on our website. It wraps up and in summary says, let this be a rallying cry. We must comfort the broken systems in this particular case.
We're going to go back to Fox 13's Kayla Solomon, who has been in this courtroom from the very beginning of this case. She joins us again. Kayla.
Yeah, Daryl briefly touched on it, that it was shocking to him that, of course, official misconduct as well as official oppression, they were also found not guilty of those two charges. And one of those simply had to do with stepping in and refraining from giving any help to Tyre after it was clear that he was beaten. Now, we know at this point that one of the witnesses that the defense called was EMT Robert Long. He was on scene that night. He was called to the scene and was initially told that Tyre had been pepper sprayed and tased and was able to get away from officers. But he admitted that he was waiting for the person that was his superior on the scene, the advanced EMT, to step up and tell him what to do. But he also admitted that he witnessed Tyre's condition deteriorate the longer they were out on the scene. And I think the timing that they gave us was, it was about 19 minutes from the time that he initially got to the scene and was told to respond to Nichols, from the time that Nichols was actually put into an ambulance and taken to St. Francis Hospital. Now, of course, in case you missed that verdict, we do have a piece of that here for you to watch live. Take a listen.
Count 1, second-degree murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Tadarius Bean, not guilty. Count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant, Demetrius Haley, not guilty. Count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant, Justice Smith, not guilty.
And of course, that count 1 that he reference there is for that second-degree murder charge. And per Tennessee law, if you do not think that something fits the bill for second-degree murder, you're allowed to consider about 9 lesser charges. Now, in this case, those lesser charges included voluntary manslaughter, as well as reckless homicide and criminally negligent homicide. You could also consider aggravated assault resulting in death and aggravated assault resulting in injury. And in this case, the jury felt that that was not something that was fit. Now, we also know the fact that the defendants were in court as this was read. Now, of course, their back was facing where I was sitting, so I couldn't see their faces and their reactions initially, but you could see that their attorneys were standing right next to them, and there was a deep sigh of relief coming from them, as well as their attorneys, as well as their families. And as I mentioned before, we heard the families of these defendants as soon as they left the courtroom. They were saying, "Thank you, Jesus," and they were embracing, and they were very happy that their family members were acquitted. But again, they're not completely off the hook. They still do have to face the federal charges that they were all found guilty of. We know Demetrius Haley was found guilty of obstruction of justice, as well as Bean and Smith, but Haley was also found guilty of excessive force resulting in bodily injury from the kick that he administered. That was one of the main focal points that we saw in the federal trial, as well as in this trial. But his attorneys were able to tell the jury multiple times that that kick was not to the head of Tyre Nichols, that in fact it was to his body. And the reason they gave was that Haley decided to kick in order to make Nichols give his arm to Smith and Bean so that he could properly be handcuffed. And of course, that testimony resonated with the jury.
Kayla, I know you've been in the courtroom again from the very beginning, and we were talking earlier that that was one of the main points by the defense attorneys. They continue to stress the impact of Emmett Martin, of course, Desmond Mills, that it was their kicks, their punches. That is what really led to the death of Tyre Nichols. And the 3 other officers were simply just trying to contain Nichols in a sense.
Yeah, and during his closing arguments yesterday, Stephen Loeffler, one of the attorneys for Demetrius Haley, actually was effective. He gave timestamps of how at the initial traffic stop when Haley was there, he had just been sprayed with pepper spray in his eyes, and he was still at the scene of that initial traffic stop when Martin, Bean, and Smith were trying to get Nichols into handcuffs. He went through timestamp by timestamp saying that it was at this time that Martin administered a kick, that he administered a punch, that he administered another kick. And this all happened before Haley even got to the scene. But then there was also video shown from the Sky Cop that shows that the second Haley did get to the scene, he made a comment that had an expletive in it. And when he hopped out the car, he did kick Nichols, according to his defense attorneys, in the arm to try to make sure that he could be put into handcuffs. But again, that seemed to resonate with the jury.
You know, Kayla, Steve Mulroy isn't one to show emotion, but he seemed visibly disturbed by this decision.
Yeah, and you can see it in the courtroom, actually. As soon as the verdict was read, I did have a direct line of sight to DA Mulroy, and you could see that the emotion had flushed from his face after we got about halfway through the verdict being read. And of course, it took a while for that full verdict because we're talking 21 charges total, 7 charges per defendant. So that's 21 charges. It took a while for all of it to be read, and you could see Mulroy's face lose emotion as it was being read completely by Judge Jones.
Let's play right now.
We are obviously disappointed by today's verdict. We respect the jury's decision, but we obviously strongly disagree with it. We, in good faith, brought this case, and I am convinced to this day that we had compelling evidence that showed that there was proof for every element of every one of the offenses that we charged. The jury took a different view. That is, of course, their right. That's the part of the decision.
Yeah, you heard it there, but you also did hear, we heard from Deputy District Attorney Paul Hagerman, who was the lead prosecutor on this case. He talked about where that jury came from and why Hamilton County in particular was chosen. Don't know how much of it you heard, but the explanation that he gave was that it's one of the counties in Tennessee that received the least amount of publicity when it came to the Tyre Nichols case. And that ultimately is where they decided to choose the jury from, of course, after the judge gave them the go-ahead to go to get that outside jury to come here to Shelby County.
Kayla, I do have a question for you that's always very interesting. We know every court case, someone wins and someone always loses. But before that verdict was read, was there a feeling inside the courtroom on which way this case was going to go?
Now, just for perspective, when that federal case happened, it took about 3 weeks. We had a verdict in a matter of 5.5 hours. It took less than 6 hours. They went to deliberate by 10, and by about 4:30, we knew that there was a verdict that had been reached. And in a situation like that, you don't really know what to expect when a verdict is reached that quickly. Now, in this case, of course, they began deliberating just after 12:30 yesterday. And the longer time goes on, the more you start to think of what the possible outcomes can be. So again, it took about 8 hours in total between yesterday and today for deliberations. It's fair to say that none of us really knew how this was going. We knew that the lesser charges were in play. We also knew that there were 7 charges that these men faced at this level. And on the federal level, it was 4 charges each. So we didn't really know what was going on. And I saw the family a couple times, the family of Tyre Nichols. They were pacing in the hallway throughout the day. They just kept saying that they didn't want to sit still. They were getting antsy. So that kind of was the feeling that really all of us had as we were waiting to get the final signal that there was a verdict today.
I'm anxious for everyone waiting to hear what happens. That is Fox 13's Kayla Solomon reporting something that came from District Attorney Steve Mulroy. He said that they are disappointed in this verdict of not guilty for all of these officers, the 3 officers involved. But at this point, we have to respect the jury.
Now, they no recourse after this. This is pretty much the end of the road on the state level. But again, the federal trial in the past, we're awaiting federal sentencing, and they were going to wait on federal sentencing until after this verdict was handed up to the judge. And here's what we got as we recap. Demetrius Haley, Darius Bean, Justin Smith found not guilty. Each man found not guilty on all 7 charges. So each man acquitted on all the charges against them. Again, as far as the jury, we've talked a little about the jury from Hamilton County, Tennessee, Chattanooga. You heard Paul Hagerman say it. Kayla reiterated it just a moment ago. They went to Hamilton County because after doing research, they found that that was the least saturated market with the news of Tyre Nichols' death and the ongoing coverage of his death and the the later ensuing trials and such. So that's where they went. They thought they would find the most impartial jurors from that county. This is after the defense filed a motion, I should say, to have an outside jury come in for this trial. 8 white women, 4 white men, and 2 alternates, a woman and a man. The alternates were dismissed yesterday just as they began deliberations. So a jury of 12 finding all 3, Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justin Smith, not guilty in this particular case. But again, I want to reiterate, this does not mean that justice has not been served in some way, because as Paul Hagerman and Steve Mulroy pointed out, 2 of these officers already copped the plea deals on both the federal charges and state charges against them. Both Ernest Martin and Desmond Mills are still in jail right now, waiting to be sentenced federally. And after this plays out, they will go through the sentencing process, the formal sentencing process at the state level as well. So there will be some repercussions for these officers moving forward, because all 3 of these, the ones that were tried today and found not guilty, also found guilty in some way, form, or fashion on the federal level back in the fall, and they will wait to hear their fate on those federal charges here in the next few months.
Again, District Attorney Steve Mulroy, he said anyone would have come to the conclusion that the officers were all responsible. You could tell as he spoke to many of the reporters today that he was frustrated, a little indefinitely disappointed. We're going to listen in again to Steve Mulroy.
So we are obviously disappointed by today's verdict. We respect the jury's decision, but we obviously strongly disagree with it. We, in good faith, brought this case, and I am convinced to this day that we had compelling evidence that showed that there was proof for every element of every one of the offenses that we charged. The jury took a different view. That is, of course, their right. That's the part of the decision. Even if you were out there outraged by this verdict, please respond in a lawful, peaceful manner. Second, as I said earlier, with respect to any charge of violation of the law, including by those who are sworn to uphold it, we'll enforce the law. And just as we did aggressively in this case, we'll do that in any other case in which the facts and the law suggest that anybody in the law enforcement community or anybody else has violated the law and used excessive force. It's hard for me to understand, as I'm sure it's hard for the public to understand, or many in the public anyway, who watched that video, who heard the testimony, who heard the compelling arguments of trial counsel. It's hard for us to imagine how someone could say that none of the defendants were guilty of any of the charges. I personally think any fair-minded person who watches the video would come to the conclusion that everybody there had some responsibility for Tyre Nichols' death.
And I think that's an overriding sentiment by most of the people watching us tonight.
One of the attorneys, the district attorneys, was Tanisha Johnson, and I believe that she kept stressing in court that no one said stop. No one said this is too much. No one said, okay, we've gone too far. She continued to stress that to the jury. But in this case, again, this jury of 8 women, 4 men, they looked at this same video and the work of these officers, the actions of these officers, they felt it fell under what Memphis police officers are allowed to do. It felt like it fell under their protocol as far as being an officer.
And just keep in mind that the burden is always on the prosecution in these particular instances. The defense, all they really have to do is sow reasonable doubt into the minds of that jury. Really, in many cases, it only takes in the minds of one juror. But today, given the fact that they deliberated for just over 8 hours, spread over 2 half days, it was pretty clear that the defense did a very good job in sowing those seeds of doubt in the jury.
Clearly compelling.
That these men were guilty of the most egregious charge, second-degree murder, all the way down to official oppression, which was count number 7. And I'll reiterate that I think a lot of people are shocked that at least count 6 and 7 weren't moving in the favor of the prosecution. Count 6, of course, official misconduct, refraining from performing duty, and official oppression. But again, all 3 found not guilty on the 7 counts against each.
And all of the lesser charges as well.
That's right.
But of course, we know these officers, they still have to get through the federal sentencing, which is coming up, and we will see what happens from there.
And after this, we have another trial, the civil trial. Of course, the date not set in stone yet, but that is forthcoming very quickly. The family of Tyre Nichols is suing the city of Memphis for $550 million. There's a lot at play in that. If you go back and in some of the research that I did, it's a very simple research. It was a Google search. You'll remember the family of George Brown sued, and I'm sorry, George Floyd. Forgive me. The family of George Floyd sued, and they sued for just over $500 million, 500 million, and they settled with the city for 34 million. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out too, as far as the city of Memphis, because a $550 million loss, as has been stated time and time again, from the mayor's office all the way down through the city council, would bankrupt this city. So that is forthcoming. So I'm sad to say that the family of Tyre Nichols, as you said, Miss Wells, as you said earlier, has already said how exhausting this has been for her. They still have one more step to take to seek justice and find some closure after the death of their son, Tyre Nichols.
Again, we have had a couple of reporters downtown at 201 Poplar today for this case. We've been talking to Kayla Solomon, but we also have Fox 13's Jack Bilyeu. Jack.
Yeah, good evening, guys. You know, folks cleared out quick. We saw the family taken into a side room there outside the courtroom. They were very sullen looking. They met with some of the prosecutors in there for a few minutes and then eventually left out through a back way. You heard the DA say that they've got a lot to process here. We actually just spoke with Kareem Ali, who's with the family and with the Crump Law Office. He told us that they were devastated, said there's a possibility they're going to speak on this at some point, but that they need time to get home and kind of process things. Now, we just got here outside 201 Poplar. You can see, you know, some of the media cars here lined up outside just to show you the huge national attention that's gotten. Some officers were actually just walked into that parking garage and cleared out. That was the other thing. It wasn't just Tyre Nichols' family that got out of here immediately. It was those defendants, the three former officers, and their families. We actually never saw those three former officers leave the courtroom through kind of the public side of things. There must have been some sort of back stairway that they went down. We did see some of those family members of them, though, walking out. A lot of cheering. One woman kept yelling hallelujah while they were getting in the elevators. But those defense attorneys, the defendants, pretty much kept out of the public eye as soon as that verdict came down. Daryl and Darcy?
Jack, I know when you were inside the courthouse just a little bit ago, you were pointing out the fact that Shelby County Sheriff's deputies, of course, they're the ones who run Shelby County Courthouse there, were really starting to show up in mass. They had a pretty significant presence. I've talked to several police officers here over just the last little bit, several sources within the MPD. I know that they are now on their level 3 alert. That's level 3 out of level 4. What are you seeing any increased police presence there around the courthouse from the MPD? I know that the guys on the streets are hoping that everything stays quiet, but they're prepared if it doesn't.
Well, Daryl, you know, I can tell you there was a lot of emotion inside. Many activists have gotten really close with the family, and we saw them crying when they walked out. That large amount of deputies that were situated outside the courtroom, they actually cleared out not long after DA Mulroy started talking. I think by that point, the defendants, Nichols' family had all cleared out, and there was no need for that increased presence inside the building. Not seeing really anyone on guard out here. I can see down the street there is a police car, but it looks to just be a typical traffic stop. But of course, you know, a lot of people are highly emotional surrounding this case. So that level 3 standby, I mean, you can absolutely understand why they'd want to do that. You know, people were invested in this, and, you know, frankly, a lot of folks are shocked by the way that verdict came out.
Fox 13's Jack Bilyeu reporting live downtown tonight. Thank you so much, Jack.
All right, we have our legal analyst, Attorney Andre Wharton. He's joining us by phone from his office in Midtown. Andre, let's cut right to it. Your thoughts?
Hey, tough verdict, but I'm not totally surprised. The reason I say that because I know each of the defendants had competent counsel, very capable counsel, but you know, you celebrate justice when it occurs, and you have to just be patient about things and let things play out. But obviously, I'm sure defense counsel and their clients are extremely pleased with the jury's verdict. I know there are a lot of shocked people on the side of of course, the Nichols family and the community. But I would urge, as many of you all have been talking about already, urge caution in terms of folks reacting. And just, we let the justice system play out, and the jury has spoken. But I was shocked, but in some sense, but not necessarily, because it's a tough case. The charges are homicide on down, and there are a lot of different dynamics that went into, I'm sure, this jury's verdict. And so I'm somewhat surprised, but I'm not totally, I must say.
I think we're a little bit surprised, to be honest with you, Andre. These three officers, Bean, Haley, and of course Smith, all of them got a not guilty verdict on every single count, even the lesser charges. As an attorney yourself, is there anything else the state could have done? Or is there something they didn't do and should have done?
It's hard to second guess the prosecution of the case. I know the three prosecutors on the case are very seasoned prosecutors. They're passionate about their job. I think they believed in their case. But let's face it, these are law enforcement officers. And although it's not written in the law, you cannot discount the fact that law enforcement, generally speaking, people like to consider law enforcement to be the good guys, if you will. You remember back in the day, at least when I was young, they called the officers officer friendly. A lot of people remember that, and the notion that officers don't come to work just to do bad things. And I think you cannot discount the fact that these officers were conducting a traffic stop, and at least the arguments were made that Mr. Nichols ran from the police and that he resisted. And so, regardless of whether it's written in the law or not, there's some school of thought that officers will get a presumption that they were doing their best with a difficult set of circumstances. And I think that was emphasized during this trial. So regardless of how strongly the case is prosecuted, how passionately they are, how much the law is, in writing, in theory, on your side, and how bad things look on a video, you cannot discount the fact that human beings, in many instances, depending on their perspectives on life, want to give the officers, quote unquote, the benefit of the doubt. And let's face it, the law says, generally speaking, defendants are presumed innocent, and until the prosecution proves a case beyond a reasonable doubt. So in this instance, maybe unlike some other defendants who are being prosecuted, the officers truly got the benefit of the doubt. And so you cannot discount that fact that the defendants, who they were, they're law enforcement officers.
And Andre, not trying to give the prosecution a hall pass here, but I think Paul Hagerman really summed it up best when he said, in this particular case, they were trying the three least culpable officers out of the five. The other two, Desmond Mills and Emmett Martin, have already, taken plea deals. So these were the three least culpable. Again, in the words of Hagerman, how hard of a road was that to travel for the prosecution, considering that fact?
Well, it's very difficult, because what they had to do under these facts is to really assert this theory of criminal responsibility. And that is, hey, look, they were out there. They had a duty to speak up, to intervene, to do something other than just watch, make comments, or use some kind of physical contact, whatever the theory they were going as to these three defendants. I think it's significant that two of the individuals who were more culpable, or most culpable out of the five, have already pled guilty and face some accountability. And so I think the fact that the jury was likely made aware of that, because I believe someone cooperated, one of the defendants, I think that had to weigh into it, because you run the risk of the jury looking at this and say, hey, look, they got the culpable guys. These other guys are just doing their job. It's already a tough job, as I just indicated. That argument is out there. And so if you're looking at it that way, they say, look, we're not letting everybody off. The guys who were most responsible have already accepted responsibility. These guys were doing a tough job. I'm not going to find them guilty of anything. And I think you saw that in their verdict. It was from the top down, no lesser included, no official misconduct, official oppression. I think what you saw there was a response to, hey, look, possibly a response to why are these guys here? Why are they being charged? It's a tough job they do. I'm just not going to find them guilty of anything.
Andre, is that because, just thinking, is that because Emmett Martin and Desmond Mills, for the most part, they weren't in the courtroom? So the jury only saw the three least culpable in this case.
Yeah. Well, yeah, those other two gentlemen were not on trial. And so it's not like they were sitting there next to him and the perception is, hey, look, you were all in it together. And so it's easy to kind of raise, it's not easy, but it can be more effective to raise the empty chair. Hey, look, the chairs that are empty here, if you will, are for the guys who are not here, who are the guilty ones. That's the responsibility. That's who shares responsibility, who possesses the sole responsibility for this, not these defendants that are in front of you. And so I think that was an effective argument for the defendants to make in this case. And I think they made it compellingly.
That is Fox 13 legal expert Andre Wharton joining us today. Thank you so much for your input, Andre.
Thank you, Andre. All right, let's go to Fox 13's Kayla Solomon. She's still live at 201 Poplar as she gives her final thoughts on this afternoon's verdict. Again, not guilty against all three former MPD officers.
Yeah, Daryl and Darcy, this is the culmination of something that's lasted 9 days. We started here on Monday, April 28th. We went all the way through 6 days straight, including Saturday, and then we were here Monday, Tuesday, and now today. Now, some of the things that stick out to me are some of the people we heard testimony from. We heard Tyre's mom get on the stand herself. She was the very first witness. She recounted the last conversation that she had with her son when she told him she was making sesame chicken for dinner. And of course, she said she was expecting to see him home for dinner to enjoy that meal, and he never made it home. He ended up getting into this encounter with the 5 former Memphis police officers just feet away from their home. Now, we do know that we've gotten multiple statements since then. You heard from the district attorney's office saying that, of course, they were not happy with today's verdict, but they respected it because, of course, it was a jury that decided the fate of these 3 former officers. Now, whether the jury did decide that these 3 were the least culpable, that remains to be unseen. Of course, we can't be in direct contact with the jury at this point, but of course, the question here is, what will those federal sentences be? All 3 of them have been found guilty of at least 1 federal charge of obstruction of justice, and we know that sentencing is set to happen next month, actually in June. So we do know that they will be held accountable to some extent. I did ask DA Mulroy if at this point they're planning to potentially retry the case, and he says no, that the burden is very low for that, or the burden is very high for that, and that happens in very other cases, very unique cases. So at this point, we do know that this is the verdict that we're going to have to deal with, at least at the state level. And it'll be interesting to see how the city reacts, of course, how the police department reacts, how the mayor reacts, and even then the family of Tyre Nichols, how they will react to the federal sentencing that is coming up here this summer.
That is Fox 13's Kayla Solomon live downtown tonight. Thank you so much, Kayla. You know what I've found that's been very interesting? We have seen other cases of police brutality and violence in other communities across the country. We've also seen the reaction after the verdict is read. In this case, it's been very quiet in this community. And I just wonder if it has to do with Tyre Nichols' mother, Ravon Wells, who said after the federal trial, stay calm, community.
Right.
Stay peaceful, community. This is not what Tyre would have wanted.
No, she has a very important voice, and she has used her voice very, very well throughout this process. Again, all credit to her and her family, given the fact that they have to be just exhausted at this point. They have to be, as is the prosecution.
Mulroy said she shows extraordinary grace.
Yep.
She truly does.
She really does. So again, just in summary of what we've seen this afternoon, just before 2 o'clock, the verdict was handed up to the judge. All 3 officers on trial for the death of Tyre Nichols found not guilty on 7 counts each.
And that also includes every lesser charge. So 21 charges they face, but all of them have been acquitted on every single charge in this case.
At the state level.
At the state level, of course. But of course, we have 2 reporters downtown. We will have a full story for you coming up tonight on Fox 13 News at 5, 6, 9, and of course 10. And everything, of course, is on our website as well. So continue to follow us.
And that's coming up, Fox 13 News at 5 in an hour and 43 minutes from now. We'll see you then.
Peers has found you not guilty on all charges of official authority. We, the jury, find
That's I did. I took one just to the car.
y'all can be seated. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, without stating what the verdict is, as we've talked about before, the court is going to poll the jury to ensure that this is a unanimous verdict. Starting with juror number 1, is this your verdict, ma'am?
Yes.
Ma'am?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ma'am?
Yes. Yes. Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. Sir? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Your Honor. All right, polling the jury, having found that this is a unanimous verdict, the court will read the verdict as follows. In indictment 2300241, State of Tennessee versus Darius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justin Smith. If counsel would like to stand with their clients. The verdicts read as follows. Count 1, second-degree murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Darius Bean, not guilty. Count 1, we, the jury, find the defendant, Demetrius Haley, not guilty. Count 1, we, the jury, find the defendant, Justice Smith, not guilty. Count 2, aggravated assault, acting in concert. We, the jury, find the defendant, Tadarius Bean, not guilty. Count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant, Demetrius Haley, not guilty. Count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant, Justin Smith, not guilty. Count 3. Aggravated kidnapping with bodily injury. Peers have found you not guilty. Judgment sheets accordingly, and this will conclude your matter that's before the court. Good luck. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
And go ahead and adjourn.
All rise. Brooke County Judge, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
We got an Action News feed coming up. Action News is there too at the scene. And press conference, they say within the next 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Maybe the mayor's there, police commission. This is my neck of the woods. Some of you might or might not know. Suburban Philadelphia was my stomping grounds throughout most of my life, or at least my younger life. And I'm quite familiar with everywhere around, including Philadelphia, though kind of want to stay out of Philadelphia.
Attorney's office here, that the police commissioner is here, the president of the FOP, Roosevelt Poplar, we saw him out here with other members of the FOP as well. They did send out a release asking for prayers for the injured officer. We also know that that officer's family was brought here by the Highway Patrol. That's in part why a lot of the streets around Penn Presbyterian Hospital here in the Palatine section are shut down right now. It's going to be tough getting around 38th Street, around Palatine, and also the University City area, because they shut down all of these streets so that they could get this injured officer to Penn Presby as fast as they could. The scene where you saw John earlier is only about 10 to 15 minutes away. He was scooped by fellow officers and rushed here in a police cruiser, obviously being able to get here faster when police are bringing you as well. So we're only hearing limited information about what happened actually over at the scene. Again, we're waiting to hear from police and from top brass, from the FOP, and also even from the mayor's office. I'm not sure if Mayor Shaw Parker is here or not at this point, but they are expected to come out and address the media, but it is going to take some time. Now, the shooting happened just before 3 o'clock this afternoon. He was brought here fairly quickly, and everybody else assembled very quickly out here. So they've been in there now for over an hour and a half at least. So that's why we're hoping to get some information in a short time. Again, I'll tell you what I'm hearing from sources. I'm hearing that he is in critical but stable condition at this point. Again, police did confirm earlier that he was
selling out real friends for a paycheck. Mama didn't teach them no home training. Wanna beat me so bad, but they failing. Step to the plate though, I'll take a challenger. I ain't scared of no low.
Tina Garagos of our team was on emails with the production company of the HBO documentary. People were paid. Okay, interesting. Okay, so Agnifilo is saying that's all fine and good to push this peremptory challenges out back to Friday. That's all fine and good, but we shouldn't have to. I think this is what's going on. I'm reading the tea leaves here, but I think Agnifilo is saying we should not have to use a peremptory strike on this HBO juror. We have some more information. Your Honor, here is the information. This is Diddy's lawyer, Agnifilo. Tina Garagos, that's Diddy's lawyer. That's Mark Garagos' daughter. She was on emails with the production company of the HBO documentary. Okay, so whoever produced the HBO documentary, because you know there's like these companies that then produce documentaries for larger streaming services. So the documentary company, or excuse me, the production company that made the documentary, Mark Agnifilo is like, people were paid. The judge's like, okay, is this documentary coming up at trial? Agnivolo said, I believe so. Okay, so breaking news. I have an announcement to make in the first or second little few tweets right here at the beginning of this thread. We find out some information. Some of the evidence which will be presented at trial has to do with the HBO documentary. Breaking news. Okay, as of today. Okay, the judge asks to the feds, we didn't ask her about pay. The judge said, shouldn't we exclude her? Okay. So long story short, the juror that was the HBO documentarian, they were a photographer who worked for HBO. And this person did still photographs like that go on the side of buses. She said there was only 5 people in that role at all at HBO, which I found to be very, very interesting. It seems like a huge company and they only have 5 still photographers. Very interesting. But the long and short of it is that person has been excluded. The assistant U.S. attorney, the feds agree. Everybody agrees. The judge agrees. The feds agree. Diddy definitely agrees. So that person is out now. Out. Okay, now moving on, it's Teeny Garagos is going to speak out now and says, the juror who works for her justice. Okay, I remember this juror. Actually, y'all are going to love this. I'm not going to pull it up right now, but I do have it on the side here for my use. I started this is juror 131, I think. Yes. 65 years old, lives alone in Westchester, manager of operations at Her Justice, married, no children, news from the Today Show, reads Essence magazine, not a TV person, but watches Chicago Police Department, Chicago PD, Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, and likes R&B. Y'all remember that juror? That's 131. I don't know. I guess we were assuming it was female. I don't remember if we got the gender of this person, but I guess we'll say she. Yeah, she. They're saying she. She was before. Okay. This tweet is written in a sort of confusing way. I don't know if it says exactly what it's supposed to say. It's okay. So Teeny Garagos. Okay. All right. So where are we in the context here? They've pushed off the peremptory challenges, but we're still doing 4 cause challenges. And what's happened is last night, Diddy's team went and did some research, did some fact checking to see if they could find any of these people lying about anything or whatever, right? So they come back today and they're like, the HBO person needs to go. The HBO production company is on emails with Teeny Garagos. We got to get rid of that. And so everybody agrees. Okay. Moving on, there's another person, another proposed juror they want to do this with, and it's Diddy's team bringing it up again. Teeny Garagos, the juror who works for Her Justice. Before that, she was at Legal Aid, the Legal Aid Society for juveniles in family court. There was a question number 14. She did not disclose that on question number 14. So y'all know I do have those as well. Let me pull up the questionnaire. We can get question 14, see exactly what she was supposed to be answering. Let's see. Here we are. Questionnaire should be docket number 315. Here it is right here. Question 14. Here it is. Have you or has any member of your family with whom you resided at the time or a close friend been employed by or received training? Employed by or received training from any local, state, or federal law enforcement agency? Okay, well, is legal? Yeah, okay. So legal aid, I guess they're saying would count as a law enforcement agency. So Diddy's team is saying this lady lied. She freaking lied. That's what they're trying to say. That's what Teeny Garagos is saying. She did not disclose this. Diddy's lawyer goes on. She did not disclose any legal training. I was an intern at Legal Aid, Teeny Garagos said. This is Diddy's lawyer. She's like, well, I interned over there. I interned at Legal Aid. And I know the office managers there. They have a lot of input. Judge said, Teeny, are you saying that the juror lied? I think she lied in the individual questioning, not group. The judge said, maybe she didn't get training in law there. Garagos said, based on my experience as an intern there for 3 months, I think she did. And judge said, okay, when did the defense become aware that this lady worked at legal aid? Tina Garagos said, we just became aware yesterday. Then here comes the assistant U.S. attorney, the feds, the government. They're like, hold on, no, an office manager does not get legal training. Judge says, I find no reason to think she lied. Maybe Diddy and his team just don't like her prior employment. That's why y'all get peremptory challenges. Bring in the jurors. Okay, all rise. This is the United States versus Sean Combs. I expect it to run 8 weeks. And then the judge gives the same introduction as he has been giving each and every day so far, which is like, don't tweet about this case. Don't read about this case. Don't talk to your wife about this case. Don't talk to your cat about this case and all of that. So, all that. Ashley, I did make a video on that. The right stuff. I was reading some of y'all's comments. So happy to catch a live. Thank you for all the hard work. Okay. You're welcome. Okay. So of course, next up is going to be juror questions. And if you can like and support Matthew Russell Lee, there are all his links. I did leave his link to his Twitter here, so you can click all those links whenever you go there. Or any. Okay. So the judge says, we're going to begin with juror number 146. But first, the judge looks over to Teeny Garagos. And remember, the jurors, you got to think of things kind of from their perspective too, right? Because all this stuff just went on in the courtroom. They didn't hear it. Like, I think she lied or whatever. They're like all the way down the hall. So they come in and then the judge looks at Teeny, who he's still like having a conversation with. And he's like, how long was she working at legal aid? Teeny said 3 years. Miss Comey, the prosecutor, implied she worked on office supplies. I think it's more than that. Okay. So the feds were like, okay, she worked on office supplies. No, she was a freaking office manager at legal aid, and that's legal training. I worked at legal aid for 3 whole months, and I know I was an intern, and I know everybody gets legal training over there. The judge said, okay, fine. I'm going to think about it. Her justice also provides legal services. Okay, so she disclosed that. Teeny Garagos is saying, like, we have to get rid of juror number 131 because she lied. And also, even if she didn't lie, her justice provides legal services, so she got to be excluded for cause. Okay, in comes juror number 146. This is a male. The judge asks him, you had a family vacation, but you're back now? Do you have any yes answers to the questionnaire? We just looked at the questionnaire. We saw, question 14. He says, no, I have no yes answers. Remember, the yes answers were things like, have you worked in certain fields? I'm just wanting to update my Excel spreadsheet to allow for this man to be in the jury pool so that I can show y'all at the end. What is this? 146. 146. Male. He's in. No yes answers. Okay. So moving right along. Juror number 220 comes in and says, my mom is a guidance counselor in the Bronx. My dad was a substance abuse counselor, and now he works for a company that sells cannabis. That was quite the turn of events. He was a substance abuse counselor, and now he works for a company that sells cannabis. What's the name of the company? Cannabis. And my stepfather was a New York State parole officer. The government, the assistant U.S. attorney says, could you ask about question 31? Okay, this is very interesting. Juror 220 said, "We are alumni of the same high school," meaning Diddy went to the same high school as this juror. I'm assuming this juror is younger than Diddy because his parents are, working at weed companies or whatever, but maybe not. They go to the same high school. They went to the same high school, the Mount St. Michael's. And y'all, I'm telling you, you have to go read the Whitney Webb. One label under blackmail is the name of the first part, maybe the name of the whole series, but she touches on this high school. And I want to make a whole video on it, but the only reason I know it is because of her research. So I got to give the credit where it's due. It is her research, and I don't want to be, misquoting it here. So I'm telling you to go read her research. It's free. You can read it. One Nation Under Blackmail. But she talks about Mount St. Michael's, and she pieces together from the public record that when Diddy was actually at that high school, there were cases of students that were Diddy's age, even some seemingly in the same exact class as Diddy, based on kind of trying to figure out the age. Because, whenever you turn 7 or whatever, when you're a kid, if you turn that age before November, October, then you're in the class below. So you can't always exactly tell exactly from someone's age, like when they graduated. But, you can see that the people that have like cases of documented abuse at this high school went to the school at the same time as Diddy was there. Now, that is not to say he was abused. That is not to say that he abused anyone. That is not what I'm saying. That's not what Whitney Webb was saying either. But it is very interesting that this school, it was egregious stuff. I don't want to get into to the details because, number one, I don't exactly specifically remember, and I don't want to misspeak on something so important and serious. But there was like abuse at this school, and it was rampant. That's definitely what I can remember. Okay. And this juror, 220, went to that high school as well. Then Mark Agnifilo asks the judge, "Can we come up and do some little whisper kiki by you, judge, real quick?" And the judge is like, "Yeah." And then the judge speaks out to the juror 220 and says, "Do you remember retweeting a meme about Sean P. Diddy Puff Daddy Combs?" And juror 220 goes, "Most likely. No." The judge said, "Why didn't you mention it?" He said, "I was doom scrolling." Poor Judge Subramanian said, "What's that?" He said, like, moving around the internet. He left, but nobody made any application. So he shared a meme or retweeted a meme about Diddy. But Mark Agnifilo and Teeny Garagos and them weren't like, no, he has to go. So I don't know why they didn't, but he remains in the pool, juror 220. The next juror comes up, male. He says, "I work at Acme Supermarkets." I think this means judge. "You didn't answer if you could discuss matters of sexual nature with fellow jurors." The guy just sat up there silently. Gave no answer. There's a lot of this like zombie-esque type behavior being described, like people just sitting up there and saying like, or like, I don't know. Like, a lot is lost in the tone and all of that because we're just reading words, tweets, abbreviated, paraphrased, but just very strange. Just sat there silent. So he gets thrown out. Goodbye. Okay, juror number 224 is answering the question. There's a question on the questionnaire. Have you ever worked as a security guard? Do you know anybody that's worked as a security guard or something like that? Juror 224 says a relative worked in security in buildings. The judge said banks, parking garages. The juror said no. The assistant U.S. attorney, so the government, the feds, they say, "Could you ask if he's seen the news about the case?" The juror, 224, he says, "I heard Diddy was accused of ST. That was about it." The judge looks over to Diddy's lawyers. They have no questions, no motions on juror 224. Moving on, he's in the jury pool. The next juror, she's a female. She has to pick up her daughter from school every day. Nobody else is going to be available to do it. So she gets sent on her way. Moving right along. Juror 263. I don't know if this is a woman, a man. My family is in the security alarm business. We deal with law enforcement, messy situations. Okay. The judge said, and you identify with the law enforcement? The security alarm business person said, yes. So basically, Diddy's guilty. The judge said, okay, you're excused for cause. So it's a lot of them getting knocked out. Boom, boom, boom. The clerk says jurors number 268 and 275 are not here. So we're moving on. We're going to go to 279. Okay, so we're not doing good here. There's a lot of misses. Okay, right? 224 in the pool. And then the next one, not in the pool. 263, not, gets kicked out. 268, not there. 275, not there. 279 also can't be on the jury pool because look, 279, a woman. I have a close girlfriend whose son works at 300 Records, a rap and hip hop label. I did not see him on the list. Another friend has a son who's in country music down in Nashville. Oh, gotta get rid of him. You look at the Universal Music Group Publishing right there on the wall. Lou Taylor, TriStar Sports and Entertainment is right there in Nashville. Nope. Aiden Canfield. Oh, Canfield. They should have called him Aiden Canfield. That would have been a good one. Okay, so this juror 279, interesting. I wonder what they do for a living. There's a woman. She said, I have a close girlfriend whose son works at 300 Records. That's a rap and hip hop label. I didn't see him on the list. I have another close girlfriend who has a son in the music business, but he's in the country music business down in Nashville. This is Aiden Canfield. So, what does this mean? Got in the plugs. She is excused for cause, but got in the plugs. I don't know what that means. Clerk, to clarify, the jurors who are not here. Okay, so we get an update on those jurors 268 and 275. Get an update on them. The clerk's like, okay, just to clarify, those jurors who are not here, they were instructed not to come by agreement of the parties. So Diddy's side and the government side agreed. We don't want them to come back. We don't want them to come. So they agreed. That's why they're not there. It's not like they just like didn't show up or something. Because some people were starting to say like, oh, are they missing or something like that? No, nobody's missing. Next juror comes along, female teacher. Again, so like that one that we just saw with the two girlfriends who have sons that are in the music industry, she was excluded. The next juror comes out, also female, a teacher, middle school, Manhattan School for Children. Oh, that sounds really bougie. I saw the footage from the hotel and I said he would be guilty. But I'm from the South. I was told how you can catch a case and everyone turns against you. So I can be fair. No applications. She's in the jury pool. Again, y'all, this doesn't mean she's going to be on the jury. It means that she's one of the remaining 45 that they're going to then dwindle down. So she says, I did see the footage from the hotel and I said he would be guilty. I don't know how she would say he would be guilty if she's also from the South and knows you can catch a case and everyone turn against you. Like, why then would she say he would be guilty if she already knew that? It's not like she just all of a sudden was from the South. You're from where you're from. I don't get her logic at all. I think I would have probably moved to strike her. Next year comes. She's also a teacher. Oh no, she just works at a school. Okay, I work at Bronx Arts and Science Charter School. I take trainings. Okay, so she's taken some of these trainings. You have to answer yes to that question on the questionnaire. I seen the Cassie video on the internet. Did he do it? I have 2 daughters, you know. The judge said, you have a bias? She said yes. So she's excused. Another female comes through, juror 292. She said, I don't do social media. I've never talked about these issues with strangers, but I think I could. No motions. She's in the pool. So juror 292, let me just at least take down the numbers of the people in the pool. Can start here. Okay, so I don't do social media. Okay. Juror 295 answered on questionnaire about personal history. The judge said, "Can you answer here?" She says, "It depends how much detail." The judge said, "I'm going to ask what happened." And she says, "To the side then." Okay, so this is the part where they did give the potential prospective jurors and I think this is good, the ability to not answer certain things on the paper. And if they wanted to answer kind of more confidentially to the side, just to the judge. Now, this will go in the transcript, but it will be on the confidential portions of the transcript. So it will be redacted. Okay, they come back. She says, "My parents are doctors. I went to law school." Wow. The judge said, "Do you practice?" She said, "For my husband's financial services firm." So she's kind of like in-house counsel for her husband's firm. "My brother-in-law, who is in Russia, was mugged." So is her husband a Russian financial services firm owner? Because her brother-in-law's in Russia. Her husband has the financial services firm. So does the husband have ties to Russia? Not that it matters. I'm just curious. Anyway, he was mugged in Russia, the brother-in-law, and was beaten and hospitalized. "I think my brother had a desk appearance ticket for the Devil's Lettuce. I had a grandfather investigated for organized crime in the Bronx." What? The judge said, "Do you have any insight into racketeering?" She said, "No." Okay. Then Diddy's lawyer comes in, Teeny Garagos, and says, "Excuse me, Your Honor, could you follow up on question 26, please?" The judge looks to juror 295 and says, "You saw the video?" She said, "I did, but I think I can be fair. As an attorney, I feel a deep ethical duty to do that." I'm glad she does. Listen, we got to give it up for the lawyers who actually feel a deep ethical duty to do something, because y'all should see how the clowns are running the circus out here right now. This is not the case for all of them. So I hope she's telling the truth. So she ends up being in the pool. All right, moving on. Okay, this is easy. Juror Marshall. The judge said, "Okay, get out of here. Excused." Moving on, juror number 303 is a female, worked at Cerritos guarding, is that Securitas or something? I don't know what that means. Guarding the New York Historical Museum. The judge said, okay, so this must be one of the companies on the list. Cerritos, a security guard company. Okay, breaking. We get a little bit of insight, a little bit of news right here. If you read between the lines, it appears to me, and again, I don't have any special insight or knowledge other than reading these tweets, okay, but what it appears like to me is this Cerritos, again, I'm not even sure this is spelled right, I don't know, but Seuritas. This woman, this person, this juror 303 worked at Cerritos guarding the New York Historical Museum. But then the judge asks her, "Do you feel positive or negative about the company?" And she said negative. "The supervisor thought men were gods and women were peasants. Also, my brother was convicted of GUNS." She said, "I have a negative view of law enforcement." This is very interesting though, y'all, because if you read between the lines here, as I get off the tweet. Sorry, gotta find it again. Okay, right here. It looks like she worked as a security guard, and she's saying that this security guard company has a sexism problem, treats men like gods and women like peasants, which absolutely would make her bias in this Diddy case. But she also is, I think it's being implied by the order of these questions that is one of the companies on the list. So is this one of the alleged so-called co-conspirators? Is this one of Diddy's firms? I mean, I don't know. But nevertheless, she has a negative view of law enforcement. She's excused. Thank you for being so honest. Moving on. Juror number 307. I've heard about the case from you, the judge. The judge said, good answer, and they send her back. She's in the pool. So 307 is in the pool. 316 comes in, juror 316, male. I feel I should not be in the jury. The judge said, why? He said, I don't really know. I don't have anything against him. The judge said, should be on or not? The juror 316 said, I don't know. What is going on in this carnival court? Okay, anyway, that person got excused. Juror 317 comes in, male. Now think about the fact that 317 people. We're juror 317. On day one, we started juror 2. Okay, now we're looking at juror 317. He comes in and the judge starts laughing, y'all. It is a small world. He comes in and the judge starts laughing. The judge says, how do you know the judge? He said, we did antitrust class actions together. I also knew former U.S. Attorney Berman. The judge, okay, so this potential juror did antitrust class action lawsuits together with Judge Subramanian. I didn't know that he had that in his past, but this person apparently worked with the judge before. And the judge goes on and asks another question though. Did you know anyone on the list? Juror said, I may have worked for Diageo. Juror said, I've had jury trials. I believe in paying it back. A longtime client in a singular industry will require counseling in regular hours in the next few weeks. It would be difficult for them. The judge said, do you work around the clock? The juror said, I was up all night last night. I'm supposed to testify before the Judiciary Committee, but I think they would understand. Okay, this person has too much going on. They need to be excluded. The client in a singular industry will require counseling. So someone's going to need legal advice during business hours in the next few weeks. And it would be difficult for my client. Agnifilo passes up a note, but then not before this guy says, oh, also, I'm supposed to testify before the Judiciary Committee. The Senate Judiciary Committee? He's supposed to testify before the Senate? Wait, hold on. Who is this person? He's a lawyer. I've had jury trials. He worked with the judge. No, I'm getting rid of this guy. He worked with the judge and did antitrusts. He knew former U.S. Attorney Berman. He maybe worked for Diageo. I don't know how to say that. He's got a client that's going to need require counseling in regular hours the next few weeks. He works around the clock. He's up all night, and he's supposed to testify before it seems like the Senate Judiciary Committee. But then he goes, but I think they would understand. Diddy's lawyer passed that question up to the judge on the notepad or the little note, sticky note or whatever. The judge turns to 317, juror 317, and says, is your client going to be ill-served or relationship impaired? If you have to be on this jury? Juror 317 said, it may be, it meaning it's probably a company. It's a transaction. So he's going to be like the guy that's helping do the transaction. He leaves. The judge asks, are there any applications? Are you, anybody wants to move to strike? The government said he seemed unbiased, but he might have an outsized influence on other jurors. Okay. Agnifilo said, I have no issue with his relationship with this judge, but he's concerned with his client. Like his mind is going to be off wandering about the client. Agnifilo doesn't want to take away a lawyer from a client or whatever. Now, it's very interesting to me to see this being done on the back end, because when I was in law school, I was told, just hang it up. You're never, ever going to be on a jury. As soon as you tell them what you do, where you went to school, even if you're not even a lawyer anymore, if you say you went to law school, nobody's going to ever have you on a jury. One of my teachers kept getting called for jury duty, and then he would be like, excited about it. You got to think about it, like a law school teacher wants to be on jury duty, and it's like when they find out you're a lawyer, they don't want you to be on the jury. And it's like I never really understood exactly why, but there's some hints, right? And then they do tell you this, like he may have an outsized influence on other jurors. Like, what if it could be a hung jury, but you have this guy here that's worked with the judge, that's like the Senate Judiciary Committee special speaker, and he's got all of this credentials and he's got all of this legal, and he's like, no, I definitely think he didn't do it, or he did do it, or whatever. He may outsize influence. So in any event, he did get excluded. So now I guess that was, let me go to the, what is that? Oh, golly, he just really goes. Okay. I'm trying to find where we just were, because as you could see, whenever we were just there, the thread ran out. So I am I'm just trying to go back up to where we were. We were about between like 2 and 1 hour ago. I think we're close here. Sorry, y'all. Here's Sarita's mail. This is the guy who knows the judge. This is one we just did. He's excluded. Okay. It looked like some tweets were missing. Hold on. I'm sorry, y'all. We did antitrust class actions together, supposed to testify. Okay, he leaves. Okay, excluded. Okay, moving on. Now, juror number 321, female. I saw the video, but I can be fair. There are two sides to every, I think that's supposed to be story. So she's in the pool. Juror 321 is in. Juror 324 comes in. This is a male. He says, I got into a fight. I pushed a woman's laundry. She had a phone. I got punched. What? The judge said, could you be fair? This person said, I don't know him. Then says, I worked as a security guard on the San Diego trolley, walked up and down the platform, blah, blah, blah. Judge said, let the record reflect, blah, blah, blah. Like that's exactly what he said. So, okay. So one of the questions, the reason he's saying this is because one of the questions is, have you ever worked as a security guard or like in the security, guard industry or
time that must pass between the formation of the premeditated intent to kill and the killing. The period of time must be long enough to allow reflection by the defendant. The premeditated intent to kill must be formed before the killing. However, in order for this aggravating factor to apply, a heightened level of premeditation demonstrated by a substantial period of reflection is required. A pretense of moral or legal justification is any claim of justification or excuse that, though insufficient to reduce the degree of murder, nevertheless rebuts the otherwise cold, calculated, or premeditated nature of the murder. Now for defendant Troy Victorino. The aggravating factors alleged by the state and accounts pertaining to victims Aaron Belanger, Francisco Io Roman, Jonathan Gleason, and Roberto Gonzalez for defendant Troy Victorino are as follows. 1. Troy Victorino was previously convicted of a felony and was on felony probation at the time of the murders. 2. Troy Victorino was previously or contemporaneously convicted of another capital felony or a felony involving the use of violence to another person. The crime of first-degree murder is a capital felony. The crime of aggravated battery is a felony involving the use of violence to another person. 3. The first-degree murder was committed while Troy Victorino was engaged or was an accomplice in the commission of a burglary. I have already explained to you what a burglary is. 4. The first-degree murder was committed for the purpose of avoiding or preventing a lawful arrest. 5. The first-degree murder was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel. Heinous means extremely wicked or shockingly evil. Atrocious means outrageously wicked and vile. Cruel means designed to inflict a high degree of pain with utter indifference to or even enjoyment of the suffering of others. The kind of crime intended to be included as especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel is one accompanied by additional acts that show that the crime was conscienceless or pitiless and was unnecessarily torturous to Francisco Io Roman, Aaron Belanger, Jonathan Gleason, and Roberto Gonzalez. 6. The first-degree murder was committed in a cold, calculated, and premeditated manner without any pretense of moral or legal justification. Cold means the murder was a product of calm and cool reflection. Calculated means having a careful plan or prearranged design to commit murder. A killing is premeditated if it occurs after the defendant consciously decides to kill. The decision must be present in the mind at the time of the killing. The law does not fix the exact period of time that must pass between the formation of the premeditated intent to kill and the killing. The period of time must be long enough to allow reflection by the defendant. The premeditated intent to kill must be formed before the killing. However, in order for this aggravating factor to apply, a heightened level of premeditation demonstrated by a substantial period of reflection is required. A pretense of moral or legal justification is any claim of justification or excuse that, though insufficient to reduce the degree of murder, nevertheless rebuts the otherwise cold, calculated, or premeditated nature of the murder. You have heard evidence about the impact of this murder on the families and community of Francisco Io Roman, Aaron Belanger, Jonathan Gleason, Roberto Gonzalez, Michelle Nathan, and Anthony Vega. This evidence was presented to show the victim's uniqueness as an individual and the resultant loss by their deaths. However, you may not consider this evidence as an aggravating factor. The state has the burden to prove an aggravating factor beyond a reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt is not a mere possible doubt, a speculative, imaginary, or forced doubt. Such a doubt must not influence you to disregard an aggravating factor if you have an abiding conviction that it exists. On the other hand, if after carefully considering, comparing, and weighing all the evidence, you do not have an abiding conviction that the aggravating factor exists, or if having a conviction, it is one which is not stable, but one which weighs a reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt as to the existence of an aggravating factor may arise from the evidence, a conflict in the evidence, or lack of evidence. If you have a reasonable doubt as to the existence of an aggravating factor, you must find that it does not exist. However, if you have no reasonable doubt, you should find the aggravating factor does exist. A finding that an aggravating factor exists must be unanimous. That is, all of you must agree that the alleged aggravating factor exists.